Tory Lanez assaulted and stabbed in prison. What could have possibly been the reason? That's what we're here to talk about today. Welcome back to the Guardian File. Before I go any further, make sure you hit that like and sub button. Now let's get into it. Tory Lanez recently flown out to the hospital after being assaulted and stabbed in prison. Now, when we first think of prison, I believe majority of us, maybe it's just me, but I believe majority of us, the first thing that we visualize is some type of violence. Violence, whether it's being jumped, punched, kicked, or like Tory Lanez, stabbed. That's the first thing that comes to mind. But what could be the possible reasons why Tory Lanez was stabbed? Now, if you're like me, the first thing that probably came to mind from what you've seen, what Tory Lanez has given to us, is most likely he was disrespectful and probably said something out of the way, which may be true. One thing that the average civilian doesn't realize is, first off, when it comes to prisons, whether it's state or federal, the most dangerous prisons are located in Florida, Texas, and like this one, California. Those are the most dangerous prisons. Also, the most dangerous type of prisons would be the penitentiary, whether it's the Federal Bureau of Prisons, their penitentiary, or the individual state prison penitentiaries. Those are where the worst of the worst are located. The killers, the rapists, the violent crimes. See, the thing is that those inmates that are located in those prisons or assigned to those prisons, most of them don't have 10-year sentences or less like Tory Lanez. Most of them are lucky if they're doing 15-year sentences. Most of them are 20 plus. And out of those 20 plus, the plus is life. And see, those guys that are doing 20 plus or life, in their minds, they have no hope, which means that they have nothing to lose. And see, when you have somebody that has nothing to lose or feels like they have nothing to lose, because we all have something to lose if we think hard enough. But when you have somebody that feels they don't have something to lose, they are willing to do things to the extreme. Things that we may take as not being that serious, they will take it all the way. And one of those things that they take seriously is respect. Now, being disrespected to the average civilian, let's say, for instance, somebody walks up to you, calls you out of your name, whether it's F you or they calling you a B. Now, worst case scenario with a majority of us, not even all, a majority of us would be a verbal confrontation, may be the repercussions to that person that's being disrespectful to us, or vice versa. A verbal altercation. And there may be some instances whereas a person isn't civilized enough, whereas they can just have a verbal altercation and walk away. In some cases, it may lead to something physical. And in even smaller cases, it may lead to someone losing their life. The thing is that in these prisons, especially penitentiaries, the walking away isn't even an option. It has to be violence. Not just violence, but immediate violence. Because if there isn't immediate violence, then you become food to those other dudes that are doing life in prison and they have nothing to lose. Once they see that you allow one person to disrespect you in any type of way and you don't retaliate in the physical way, then guess what? Your time there is going to be difficult as hell. So, this is why I found out, or I realized after working in prison so long, that someone will lose their life in prison for one of the dumbest reasons. Or they'll be assaulted in prison for some of the dumbest reasons. And most of the time, it's because they were being, quote unquote, disrespectful. So, The Tory Lanez that we know, the Tory Lanez that we've seen on social media, I think the rapper Dax, that he humiliated because he was being quote unquote disrespectful. Stuff like that. That mouth of his can get him stabbed up. So that may be one of the reasons. He might have been really disrespectful. And there's been some photos that recently surfaced of Tory Lanez where he's looking kind of swole. And obviously Tory Lanez has what we all call, I think it's Napoleon complex, that short man's complex, which I have myself. You know, I'm 5'8". Tory Lanez, I believe he's 5'4". So you can imagine, in his mind, he may feel like he's 7 feet tall because he has to overcompensate for his lack of size. Pause. Now, it's not guaranteed, or it hasn't been stated that that's the reason why he was assaulted or stabbed. But, you know, I'm just guessing. I'm pretty sure I'm not the only person that believes that that's the reason. But that's one possible reason. The next possible reason is that he didn't have his money to pay. And pay, I mean, he's being extorted. A majority, if not all, of famous individuals who are in prison, especially famous people that we all know have money or resources, it's basically guaranteed that they will be extorted in prison. Whether it's by their own kind, most likely it's going to be by their own kind. If they were just the average inmate, they would run with that same card if they went to prison. They wouldn't be extorted, though. Just most likely they don't have the money. When it comes to a P. Diddy, Sean Combs, R. Kelly, etc., they're having to pay for their safety. They're paying from their safety from the guys that would most likely not charge them if they weren't rich. The black guys. So they're paying for their own group not to assault them, and they're also paying to be protected by that same group that they have to pay not to hurt them, paying them to prevent other groups from extorting or hurting them. That's wild, right? You can't win for nothing if you're famous in prison. But I digress. Yeah, but that's how it goes. So, most likely, if that's the reason, he could have ran out of resources. You know, paying for lawyers' appeals and, you know, all that other good stuff. So, once that money runs out, somehow you have to figure out a way to come up with the funds to continue to pay for that protection. Because you can say that I don't have the money. They're not going to believe you. They know if you don't have the money, you know somebody that has it. And somebody that cares about you enough that's willing to cough up that money. So there's no getting out of that. Now, that may not be the guaranteed reason, but it has to be out of those two, because the only other option or the only other situation that would cause him to be assaulted that way in prison is if he runs up a debt with gambling or drugs. And most likely, if he can afford to pay the extortion fee, he can afford to pay for his drugs that he may be using. I don't know, the way he's looking, he's probably not using anything, but, you know, I'm just trying to cover all bases. If he has the money to pay for extortion fees, he has the money to pay for his drugs. Or if he's a gambler, he would most likely have the money to pay for his gambling debt, unless it just ran up to 6 figures plus or something like that. Some astronomical number that he can't afford right now, which I doubt. But those are the three main reasons why possibly he was stabbed and assaulted in prison. Now, the only other reason that I could possibly think of, which I don't know, it could have happened, I don't know, is if he snitched a toad on somebody within the the institution. Not necessarily somebody that has to do with his case, but, inmates view telling on one another within the prison to authorities is just as bad, if not worse, than snitching on your co-defendants that got you ending up in prison. So that could be it. Yeah, those are the main three, plus that fourth reason that I can possibly think of. Most likely it was because he was being, disrespectful, and his mouth wrote a check that his ass couldn't cash. And to be completely honest with you, for this to happen to Tory Lanez, it had to be something major. Because to be completely honest, now, you think about it, whether it's the Federal Bureau of Prisons or state facilities, they'll go the extra mile to make sure a celebrity inmate is protected, kept safe. Because violence happens in prisons on a regular basis, but we don't pay any attention to it. There's someone stabbed at multiple prisons every single day in the prison system. It's not in the newspaper. We don't know anything about it. Now, we may speculate, but every single time something happens to a famous inmate, it will get leaked to the press. We've learned a lot about some of the things that's going on with Diddy in jail, from him threatening to take his own self out. Got to think about it. Jeffrey Epstein, when he supposedly ended himself, that put a major spotlight on the Bureau of Prisons, the federal prisons, which caused them to be extremely more strict on the policies that they already had. Now they're beginning to enforce them in that lockdown unit, segregation. Now they are making sure those 30-minute checks are being done. Whereas if it's not being done, you can lose your job. And if something happens, if you're not doing those 30-minute checks like you're supposed to, then you can be liable for it and be charged criminally for it. So when things happen to famous inmates, a lot of attention comes along with it. A lot of attention that these facilities don't want. So you best believe that they're going the extra mile to try to make sure that these famous inmates are kept safe and out of harm's way. So for this to happen to him, it had to be something major. It had to be. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section. If you believe or think that there could possibly be any other reason why he was stabbed up or assaulted in prison, put it in the comments section. Make sure you hit that like and sub button. Till next time, I'm out.